Hello there, it's great to be back. I am Phumlani M. Majosi. This is the Phumlani Majosi Show, where we give you a conservative perspective on local and global socio-economic affairs. Gabriel McKean is off this week, so I will be sailing alone. Last week, I was in Cape Town and spoke at a very interesting conference where it was a gathering of politicians. And the themes I touched on were basically more about personal responsibility, the importance of free markets, the importance of liberty, individual liberty, how what we can do as a people of South Africa to better our lives. And I was borrowing a lot from my book, Lessons from Past Heroes, that you see here behind me. A very interesting conference, very much engaged. The books I brought with me, my copies, the copies I brought with me, they sold out right on the spot, which was just amazing. The engagement was robust. People engaging on the points I made during the conference. Now, there's one thing I thought I should, revisit um, this week to discuss with you or to highlight to you that I spoke about at the conference last week. You know, when I was a year or two back, when I was driving back home in rural areas of KwaZulu-Natal, KwaMaphumulo, I saw two public schools that were in very, very bad shape. I even took photographs. The first one is Mapupe Sizwe High School, and the second one is Nyamazana. These are all in KwaMaphumulo. These both of these schools. I was shocked by the conditions of those schools. The windows were totally broken. Um, the yards, I can see that there could even be snakes that live there. They are not taken care of. You can see that there's no security in the schools. The infrastructure is collapsing in those schools. It was a total shocker for me. I was totally shocked when I saw those conditions in those schools. I was like, what is going on here? But then, ever since that time, one question I have, you know, been asking is this one. If you are a parent, how do you feel when your child wakes up every morning and goes to a school that has a collapsing infrastructure, a place that is totally unsafe, broken windows, the snakes could be living there because of the yards are not being, the environment is not being taken care of. When your child wakes up every day and goes to such a place, what do you say as a parent? That is the question I have been thinking about ever since I saw what I saw in those two schools. How is it that parents, they let their kids go to these schools that are a total disgraceful mess? How do they do that? Where is the responsibility of parents? Why don't they speak up to say what is going on in these schools? How is it that our kids are being taught in such an environment? How is that happening? How do parents allow something like that to happen? It's a big question. Because then it points to the importance of responsibility. Parents have a responsibility about their kids' education. That's very important. Now, what I highlighted at the conference, which I'm also going to highlight here, is that politicians will always be sometimes lazy. They misuse the funds. They implement bad policy. They will always do all kinds of bad things, that are counterproductive to our socio-economic progress. Politicians are going to do that. Very few ones will come and do the right stuff. They are going to do that. Now, in a democracy, we must hold the politicians who fail us to account, right? We must speak up. We must also react to their conduct at the ballot box, right? The question is then, in a democracy like ours, how is it that we allow schools, how do parents allow schools to look like that? Those two schools in KwaMaphumulo, Nyamazane and Mapopesizwe, that they are a mess, right? You can see from the outside that this is a mess. Now, I ask again, what are the parents doing? How do they let their kids go to such environments? It's about what I've always been talking about, and that is personal responsibility. It begins in the homes. It begins in knowing, where is your child going? What is she or he doing at school? They come back, are they doing their homework, right? What can you do to assist them to have a better understanding of their academic work? That is very important. We are lacking in that front. We are lacking in that front. We are not really ensuring that the kids, they when they at home, and when it comes to their education, that the parents are there. We are lacking in that culture, right? Policy will be bad policy. It will be policy in many cases, especially in South Africa. We have seen how the ANC has mishandled, public policy on education or education policy. They have totally messed up that. In fact, this book I have here, A Countdown to Socialism by Anthea Jeffrey, it has very interesting insights on the problems of public education in South Africa. Now, let me just read this to you, which is very much disturbing. Anthea writes about the failure to improve quality of education. That's the failure of the ANC government. She speaks about the fact that there is a great deal of spending on education. In fact, at least 20% of our expenditure, at least 20% of our expenditure goes to education. Yet the outcomes are very bad. Now, let me read this line for you. Here in Anthea Jeffrey's book, Countdown to Socialism, page 189. Anthea writes, in 2023-24, budget allocates 451 billion rands, or 20.2% of total state spending to education, equivalent to 6.4% of GDP. And they're right, though this figure puts South Africa behind Denmark, which spent 7.8% of GDP on education in 2019, it is significantly higher than the education budgets of most other countries, both developed and emerging. Sadly, however, in their rights, most South African public schools are so dysfunctional that the country gets little value for its exceptionally large schooling spans, right? In other words, we are spending a lot of money, yet the outcomes we get, it's a total mess. In fact, we do worse on educational outcomes, even when you compare to poorer countries, we compare to some poorer countries in the African continent. And that is concerning. That must concern us all. And there also writes about the SATU, the teachers union, that is very much active in our education, public education system. It very much blocks reform, any kind of reform that can improve the educational outcomes in the country. And their rights. This is where now she writes about SATU. And their rights. SATU has long resisted attempts to reintroduce teacher inspections and competency tests, conduct teacher training outside school hours, or link teacher pay to productivity. That's what. So SATU has resisted those attempts, right? They have been pushing back against such reforms. And they also writes about state control in public schools. where the government has intervened heavily with respect to governing bodies in communities, governing bodies of public schools. So these are the problems. And that there is also a push to discourage private schools or independent schools in the country, done, by the way, by big labor union, big unions, as well as government as well, the ANC government. So this book highlights the very big problems or the bad policies when it comes to education in the country. Bad policies by the ANC government. This book is very good in highlighting that, and I hope that you will get this very fascinating book. In fact, I have written in one of my columns that this is a book that you must read, along with, of course, Mind Here, Lessons from Past Heroes. Read these two books, this one and Mind Here, and reflect on them before the election this year. Because really, the point I'm making here is that politicians will be bad on public policy in most cases. That's been happening. Now we must hold them to account, right? If at least 20% of our expenditure goes into education, then why are those two schools I'm speaking about in Goma Phumlani, why are they such a total mess? A place that is not conducive to learning, unsafe for young people. So that's what we should be asking now, and that's what we should be reflecting upon, and hold our leaders to account. Be responsible for our kids' education. That is very important. Be responsible for our kids' education, because otherwise, if you don't hold these leaders to account, they will screw us. They've already done so. They have damaged the country. But it begins with personal responsibility. Parents must be engaged and hold education leaders to account. Now, that's one discussion I wanted to have with you. The second one is around Julius Malema. Julius Malema, he has said he's willing to go into a coalition with parties that think like the EFF, his party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, which is a far-left Leninist organization that promotes all kinds of destructive ideas and has perpetrated, or advocates for racial divisions in the country. He says he's willing, he's open to working with organizations like PAC, organizations like ATM, and organizations like the MK Party, President Jacob Zuma. That's what Malema is saying, because he thinks these parties, they think along the same lines of his party, which is this obsession of land, this obsession of redistribution, this obsession of race-based policies. You can sense even from their language that these people are pushing for a racially divisive agenda in the country. Now, it's fine if they wish to do that. They're the same ideology anyway. The ideology of what I have termed the ideology of promoting victimhood, right? The obsession over things that really, even according to the data or the data, does not show that they are the most important things, or do not show that they are the most important things to South Africans. The obsession over land is really very much misleading, because even the surveys that have been done by the South African Institute of Race Relations, they don't put land at the top as a priority for South Africans. Even Barometer as well, when you look at the surveys where they have asked South Africans what it is that matters a great deal to them, the land is not amongst the top priorities. South Africans want jobs. They want an end in corruption. They want, an end in crime. Crime is a serious problem. They want improved service delivery. The obsession of the land is by leftist politicians who want to basically to divide and perpetuate the notion that the land is with white people if we can get the land from white people and give it to you, you will be richer. Totally misleading, right? There's nothing like that. Um, what makes nations richer is strong education, is families, right? Is work, um, economic productivity. Those are things that make people rich, or nations to prosper. Now, the fact that South Africans, wherever they have been surveyed, they don't put the land up there. That tells you everything, you know. In fact, Anthea Jeffrey, who the author of this book, has written very much interesting things. In fact, including in this book, she does, write about the land matters. And one of the things she highlights is that since 1994, since the restitution process began, you know, people have chosen, most people who were claiming from the government, who had lost land previously and claiming from government, they have chosen to take money compensation or financial compensation. They have never taken back land. In fact, she says at least more than 90% of the people who have been claiming from government when it comes to land, they have taken the financial compensation, not the land. Because people are focused, it's a new era right now. This is it's a new era, right? So in this era, it's an era of more advanced sort of way of thinking. Technologically, people are focused on other things. There are different ways now of accumulating wealth. People want jobs. They want to be in cities. They want to be. They want to do things that are more modern than being stuck on them on the land issues, as if really that is the solution. In fact, I have said that in one of the conferences last year. I made a very important point, and that is there are many countries, in fact, all countries in Africa, they all do have land, right? Yet they are poor, right? Very much poor. Some of them with the GDP per capita of $500 or so, right? $1,000, $800. This is GDP per capita. These are poor countries. Yet everybody there, they do have the land. Yet they are not getting rich. They are not getting wealthy out of that. Why? Because there is more you need. It's not about land. It's about human capital. It's about this. This is what needs to be, we need to invest in. It's about the brains. We need to create competitive brains through entrepreneurship, through education, through, skills development. That is where our focus must be. And it must be the programs that are globally competitive. Because why? Human capital is key, and it has to be globally competitive human capital. So yeah, that is what how we should think. Julius Malema, he can partner with these parties that are radical, nationalists, obsessed with race. He can partner with them. They are the same thing anyway. We just hope that South Africans, they do see through through these parties, and that having them in governance would be quite destructive. These parties, they say they want to achieve two-thirds majority. Imagine if they were to achieve the two-thirds majority. Imagine we had a two-thirds majority of people who are radical leftists, radical left-wing politics. That would sink the country. I just hope that South Africans will see through that. It's been great to talk to you. Remember, I am on our website, phumlanimajosi.com. I'm also on X at Phumlani M Majosi. I'm also on LinkedIn as well for professionals. I am Phumlani M Majosi. I also do have a Facebook page at Phumlani M Majosi. We'll chat next week.